Do we really have a water shortage? There are many who say that we do, but boy, December 11 here in Whatcom County would sure seem to say a different message than that. Hi there. Thank you for joining me. This is Fred Lickle with Whatcom Family Farmers, and this is our edition of the Fred Talk. So, as most of you now know, December 11, we had once again another massive flood here in Whatcom County. Some would call it a 100-year flood, the second one in 4 years. It left devastation once again in places like Everson and Nooksack and Sumas. And it drowned out our farmers, and it left us with a lingering sense of a combination of frustration and resignation and anger, and rightfully so, because what we're seeing here is a river system that is increasingly becoming more of a difficulty. There's more and more sediment coming down. There's less and less room for the water to go places, so it spills over the banks. And this becomes certainly something that we have been dealing with for a few years here. Solutions have been elusive. There are wide voices on different sides saying different things. And so coming to a solution for our county, it feels like sometimes they're kind of paralyzed for what a solution should look like. But what we really find ironic in this is, at the same time, and as we've been discussing with you, we have this irony of a water rights adjudication, which would indicate a water shortage, which is occurring sometimes in July and August, and it negatively affects salmon and sometimes our farms as well. And this whole idea of we're going to have to figure out what our water rights are. That has also been happening and becoming a pretty big thing here in December, and that finally the judge is allowing some motions. This very delicately, he's allowing some motions to go forward, possibly, that he's going to be looking at. And one of the very first motions that came up were two from various agriculture industries, various agriculture groups that are saying, we believe the adjudication needs to be modified, or in one case, even thrown out. The reason for that, ironically enough, connecting it to the floods, is because what I would call the Canadian question. What are we going to do when a significant portion of the watershed flows to Canada in Sumas, but then on just past that, going a little bit further west, you have huge chunks of the Bertrand and Fish Trap watersheds where the water comes from Canada into Whatcom County. That leaves our farmers in this impossible situation where Canada, which isn't subject to any of the rules that we have to do, are probably using a lot more water than what we are, and will probably continue to use more and cause more difficulties for us, and yet they don't have to do anything. So that's why the farmers have filed this motion, which hopefully we're hoping to see if the judge will consider that. So that brings us to that irony of linking these two together, right? And literally, I think it was the day before the floods hit, we were having a meeting here with the farmers, and in the room was a hydrogeologist, and one of the farmers said, so when the river is at its capacity it is now, how much water is going through the river at any one time? And he came back and said it would take 10 hours at the current flow to irrigate all of agriculture for the entire summer. 10 hours. How ironic that we've got water flowing everywhere, and yet it's that small amount that we're asking for in the summer. It really begs towards, we need to be finding solutions, right? That's why we're saying we have to be linking these two together. There needs to be discussions about finding ways to store water and do other things that will help not just farming, but also salmon, but also help flooding, because these are really, really important. Now, the good news, there are some encouraging things that come out of this. And one of the things that at least I have been seeing is we are starting to see a lot of voices after this flood who are saying, oh, we need to start looking at solutions. When you start looking at things like climate change and the issues with the river continuing to clog up with more and more sediment, more and more people are saying, we got to find solutions, and we got to find them sooner than later. This is where we could really use you out there, public, to help us push this forward. We have this group we've talked about before called Water for Whatcom, which combines people from a broad range of the community who are saying exactly that. We need solutions. We need them sooner than later. We would encourage you, go to Whatcom Family, or go to waterforwhatcom.org. Also go to whatcomfamilyfarmers.org and sign up for getting updates. Sign up for places where you can have your voice be heard. Thanks again for listening. Once again, this is Fred Lickel, Executive Director at Whatcom Family Farmers, with this edition of the Fred Talk.